My name is Rolf. I am 76. I live in a modest one-story house on the outskirts of our town, where the asphalt turns into cracks, where the trees stand grey and bare, even in spring. No one stays here for long. The postman throws the newspaper under the gate, not in the mailbox, and the neighbors, well, they are silent when they pass by. Once I built great things. Now, I heat the kettle twice a day and listen to the old refrigerator humming like a heart that doesn't want to beat. My house smells of dust and camphor. It's been a year since I touched the tools in the garage. My hands are shaking. Once these hands could have assembled an engine blindly. And now they tremble when they try to open a jar of jam. It's both funny and painful. My son is the head of an IT company. His photo was in some magazine. The smile on the cover was fake, but confident. My daughter is a psychotherapist. Her voice on the phone is soft and empty. They both talk to me as if I were a patient about to lose myself in their own memories. Grandchildren? One of them, Arson, said last week, "Grandpa, you don't understand anything in the world, it's time for you to just rest." And I really didn't say anything. I just nodded, because there was not a single shadow of sympathy in his eyes. Only contempt, short, like a knife. I go to the store twice a week. There, the saleswoman doesn't look me in the eye. The young people in the queue behind me sigh quietly when I slowly put out my kopecks on the counter. Once they even said to me, "Maybe it's better to pay with a card, Grandpa." With a mockery that they didn't even hide. But I don't have a card. And I won't. In the hospital, I sat in the corridor for an hour. The doctor, young, tall, in a white shirt, didn't even stop when I asked, "Sir, how long will it be?" He walked past without looking, only saying to the nurse, "Another one? Wait for me." And I waited. And every day when I come home, I sit on the old sofa and listen to the clock. Tick-tock. Tick-tock. It's the only sound that doesn't give away. In the window is a street that no one comes to me on. I started writing down my thoughts. In the old notebook, the pages are filled not so much with words as with pain. I don't even know why I write. Maybe to keep from screaming. Maybe to keep from forgetting that I'm still alive. Sometimes I go out at night. I walk through the city, where empty bus stops rustle like sails, where the light of the streetlights rests on an honest word. No one stops me. Because I'm invisible. But deep inside me, something begins to stir. It's not anger. This is an emptiness that doesn't ask for permission. This isn't a scream, it's a silence that constricts the throat. I used to be strong. I was listened to. I made decisions that changed people's lives. Now I'm ignored like extraneous noise. And I think, how did this happen? Where was the moment when I stopped being needed? And why the hell does it hurt so much? I'm not asking for love. I'm asking for respect. But it seems that even that is a luxury for an old man these days. Sometimes I sit in silence and remember. Not because I want to, there's just no other way. There aren't many things left that make me feel alive. Memory is one of them. I used to be Rolf Heinrich, a man who picked up the phone and changed the course of events. I was known in 3 areas. I had a business, a repair company, logistics, woodworking. I created all of this from scratch. Without connections, without an inheritance. Only with my hands, brains, and stubbornness. In the 80s, I slept 4 hours a day. I sat with magazines, counted. Accounting by hand. Investments are risky, but I knew where the pressure would hold and where it would burst. I was respected. I was feared. I was listened to. I knew how to speak in a way that even the impudent would be silent. I remember building our house with my own hands. Each brick was a night after work. I bought the furniture myself, loaded it, unloaded it. And when my son was born, I held him in my arms and thought, "You will never know what cold and fear are. I will not let you do that." And indeed, he did not know. I took on all the difficult things myself, without showing an ounce of fatigue. All my life, I bent my back so that they would walk straight. And my wife, Vera. She was a quiet, strong woman. She did not praise too much, but always stood behind her when it was difficult. She did not live to old age, cancer. 20 days between diagnosis and death. I was with her until her last breath. Then, for the first time in many years, I cried like a boy. Not because of fear, because of powerlessness. After her, I did not live, but functioned. I kept everything for the children. I helped my son with a loan. I took my daughter to study abroad. I did not demand gratitude. It was enough for me to know that they could do more than I could. That they wouldn't have to fight through rocks and mud like I did. But here's the irony, they didn't grow up in my blood, they grew up on top of it. They don't remember who took off their mittens in the winter to keep their hands warm. Who gave the last bit, keeping nothing for themselves. The daughter says, "Dad, you were always tough." The son nods, and silent. You didn't know how to show love. They don't know that my love is a roof over my head, food in the refrigerator, a peaceful sleep in childhood. Not hugs and candy. I gave them my youth. I gave them everything. And what do I have now? An empty house. The phone is off. Silence that hurts more than any scream. In the closet is a suit from the times when I was negotiating. Grey, strict, smells of mothballs and the past. I tried it on once, and realized that those times didn't just pass. They died. No one calls to ask how I'm doing. No one comes over without an occasion. Even the neighbors stopped asking how I'm doing. Maybe they think I'm already dead, it's just that my body hasn't fallen off yet. Do you know what's the scariest thing? Not the pain. But the emptiness. When you gave more than you had, and came back with nothing. And so, I'm writing in my diary again. The day. People. Words. Moments. I remember. I remember everything. I didn't notice it right away when it started to fade. It comes quietly. From the first time my son didn't call back. From the first, "I don't have time, Dad." From the first, "Grandpa, I'm playing, don't disturb me." Each such phrase was like a drop of acid to my heart. But I kept quiet. I learned to forgive myself. Once I fell in the hallway, I lost my balance, slipped. I sat on the floor, clutching my back, and listened to the TV in the next room drowning out my moans. 15 minutes later, Arson, my grandson, finally came over. He looked me up and down and shrugged. "Well, Grandpa, it's your own fault. Maybe it's time to go to some kind of hospice?" Some kind of hospice. I didn't say anything then. I just got up, clenching my jaw, and went to the bathroom. I stared in the mirror for a long time. And I didn't see myself. And someone else, tired, hunched over, with eyes that no longer shine. Another stroke in the hospital. I brought the tests. A young doctor, with a tablet and a tired face, interrupted me in mid-sentence. "Come on, hurry up, I have 3 more patients to wait." "You're old, what do you want?" "Pills for eternal life." I tried to explain that I feel pain in my chest at night. That my shortness of breath has increased. But his eyes looked right through me. For him, I'm a statistic, not a person. Old. This is the only thing I am now for society. Even in the store, I no longer exist. They pass me by in line. Young people jostle, take the last loaves of bread from the shelves, without looking to see that I'm reaching for the same one. The saleswoman doesn't hear when I ask for change. But I hear. And I write it down. My diary now contains more than memories. There are names. Dates. Phrases that cut. "Dad, I'm tired." "Maybe you forgot to take something." "Why do you need the internet, Grandpa?" I didn't answer. But I wrote it down. My hand is still firm when it comes to the truth. I'm learning to watch silently, not to blink. I understand that they're hiding me while I'm still alive. They are burying me with memories, indifference, and jokes. And then there was that day. The breaking point. I was carrying 2 packages from the store. One tore, the cans rolled along the sidewalk. I bent over, lost my balance, and knelt down, like an old tree that breaks not from the wind but from time. I looked up. A couple was walking by, young, with coffee. I whispered, "Can you help?" They stopped. The girl laughed. The guy said, "Maybe you can carry the bag too." "Grandpa, this isn't a pension patrol here." Laughter. People were walking by. No one stopped. No one looked me in the eye. I collected the cans myself. Slowly. Humiliated. But it wasn't in my head that the pain was there. It was deeper. At that moment, something clicked inside me. My eyes blurred, but not from tears. From clarity. I'm no longer a victim. I no longer ask. I no longer forgive. I came home, took off my coat. I hung it up neatly. I sat on the bed. I sat for a long time. And the silence that had been dead before spoke. It no longer scared. It called. It was filled with anger. Silent, cold, precise, like a razor's edge. I opened the diary. I flipped to the last entry. I picked up a pen. And under the names I wrote a new phrase, begin. After that day on the street, I was no longer the person I was yesterday. No, I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I didn't seek pity. I simply peeled off the last skin of patience from my soul. It peeled off like old paint. Beneath it, something that had been waiting in the shadows for a long time was revealed. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the kitchen, listened to the clock ticking, and slowly turned the pages of my diary. Each entry was like a shard of glass. I read the voices of people who had once called me a strength, and then a burden. Every word, thrown involuntarily, now had meaning. I no longer sought excuses from those who were slowly killing me. The silence of the house changed. It was no longer a dead, indifferent wasteland. It breathed with me. And in this silence, I felt myself, real. Not broken. Not forgotten. But someone who had simply been silent for too long. I started with something simple, the phone book. Old, worn, with names none of my children even know. Once these people would come to me when they needed permits, supplies, protection, loans, connections, cover. Once my call was enough to turn someone's life around. I kept their debts. And their weaknesses. I don't need the strength of the young when I have the memory of the old. The next day I bought a new notebook. Black. Without inscriptions. I neatly divided it into sections. Family. Society. Outside witnesses. Past faces. Under each heading, a name. Not for physical violence. No. I'm not going to hit, scream or scare. My new self works quietly. I won't retaliate with force, I'll break the balance. Each of them will feel small. Lonely. Doubtful. Like they did to me. It started with my son. I knew where the holes were in his business. I knew who he had deceived at the start, who he had agreed with unofficially, who he had framed in documents. And I knew those who had long been waiting for the moment to bite back. I didn't call him, I called them. I didn't threaten. I just reminded them of the facts. Old cases don't die. They are waiting, just like me. My son called later. His voice wasn't as confident. He said, "Dad, it's strange, but one of the partners suddenly decided to review the old contract." "It's a coincidence, right?" I replied, "Of course, son. Coincidence is just well-planned timing." My daughter didn't immediately catch my attention. But I remembered her patience, her lectures on empathy, her image of the ideal mother. I knew how she treated other people's injuries without seeing mine. So I started with her colleagues. Old acquaintances, old stories, old photos from corporate parties, where the truth peeks through wine and smiles. I didn't destroy, I pushed. And they already ask her, who are you without a brand, without a proper husband, without a shine on your business card? Grandson, arson. The one who talked about hospice. Does he like games? I'll show him the game. And it's not me, the system, that will take away his scholarship. Someone will simply file an anonymous statement about using someone else's code. And it's true, he stole it from his classmate. I knew it for a long time, because I saw it myself. But the coldest moment was when I remembered those who laughed on the street. I didn't know their names, but stores have cameras, the city has friends. I still have people who remember who I was. Not out of love, out of fear and respect. One of those young men will not be hired now because facts from the past have come to light. He will not be hurt by his body, by his pride. I did not hide. I simply became a shadow that is no longer avoided. I choose who it touches. And when I went to bed for the first time in a long time, I did not feel old. I felt alive. I learned to move slowly, like clockwork, slowly, precisely, without unnecessary sounds. My life became a game of intellect, not out of pleasure, but out of the need to measure justice. I did not seek revenge as a relief, I sought it as a correction. Let it be a cold, irreversible response to the years when I was killed not with a knife, but with indifference. The first step is information. I opened old connections that had lain like shadows in a closet for years. People who had once accepted my challenges answered not out of friendship, but out of a score in their memory. Rolf helped, it's time to thank. I did not ask for much. I did not rush into sinful details. I simply played on the old strings. Do you remember that case? Maybe we should remember its rules. And they remembered. Because memory is the surest engine of fear for those who had something to hide. I did not break down doors. I didn't set fire to offices. I created situations that seemed like accidents, in which their decisions boomeranged back at them. Arson lost his scholarship, not because of my hand, but because of a chain of observations and chance coincidences that I gently nudged. My son discovered that the partner he had been playing in the shadows was starting to look for the truth in documents. My daughter received a series of questions from colleagues, delicate, but long, undermining her reputation. These weren't punches. These were long, small cuts to her reputation, light, but multiple, turning into bleeding. And most importantly, everything looked like a chain of circumstances, not my purposeful action. They would ask me if I was cruel. No. Cruelty is in physical, fleeting rage, in a scene of screaming and destruction. Mine is different. My revenge has rules. It is as pure as mathematics. In the evening, one detail; in the afternoon, a friend. I work with the same weak points that I myself used mercilessly when I was building my business and protecting my family. Now these weak points return to their owners in the most inconvenient forms: breaking deals at the right time, dubious calls, unreliable partners, public issues that undermine trust. And when all these small elements add up, a tsunami results, quiet but devastating. I do not feel pleasure from their downfalls. On the contrary, it often happens that I sit in the dark and think about Vera, about how she looked at the children with hope. Would she want such a price for my honor? I do not know. But I know one thing: when they call now, their voices shake the way mine used to. And it is like a mirror in which I see my years ago, only now I am in it not from a shadow, but with a sharp, cold outline. They ask me, was there fear? Yes, there was fear, but not of revenge, but of the fact that my action could destroy more than I had planned. I always kept a limit, not to hurt anyone's child, not to destroy the lives of innocent people. I don't want what I feared in my own heart to happen, to lose my dignity forever, to become someone they would one day mourn and laugh at. I wanted only one thing: for them to feel the same disturbing emptiness that had been killing me for so many years. For them to see themselves in the mirror, and for this reflection to be impossible to turn away. The game continued. People began to quarrel among themselves. Partners who had once had criminal or simply dishonest deals were now looking for a way to avoid the consequences. This led to accounting errors, suspicions among investors, and contract breaks. The family, which had always avoided talking about my condition, suddenly began to talk, but not to me anymore, but among themselves, in suspicion, in fear, in pain. The grandson stopped laughing at his old grandfather. Instead, he worries at night, not understanding why everything is falling apart. And when he asked for advice, I remained silent, because I had taught him a different path, which now turned against them. When the system began to collapse under the weight of the truth, I understood the main thing. I do not want to seize their destinies, I want to restore balance. My intervention is like a clear note in a melody that they have forgotten to listen to. Every action, the call, the letter, the meeting, the reminder, was designed to make them look at themselves, not just at their victories, but also at their betrayals. And as they looked, they saw my face in the echo. The final step was a small ceremony of shadow. The night, the lamp, the letters slowly opening. I had no intention of humiliating anyone publicly. I wanted them to know that someone was watching closely, that their actions had a response. And when they finally gathered in the cramped space, the eyes of each of them were full of questions, nervous jokes, and lies. I was at the door, but not for the revenge sector, for a final conversation. I looked at their faces and felt no joy. I felt a quiet victory, the victory of a man who had regained his right to be seen. And when it was quiet, no one had fallen silent, no one had been completely destroyed. But a change had happened. The small cracks in the houses of their lives became places where decisions had to be made, the same decisions that had once been made about me. They began to weigh more. And the weight was uncomfortable. I stayed in the shadows because it was safe. In the shadows I could see reactions, see people shift positions, their pride giving way to fear and, finally, to be honest, remorse. The final step was a small ceremony of shadow. The night, the lamp, the slowly opening letters. I had no intention of humiliating anyone publicly. I wanted them to know that someone was watching, that their actions had repercussions. And when they finally gathered in the small space, each of their eyes were full of questions, nervous jokes, and lies. I was in the doorway, but not for the revenge sector, for one last conversation. I looked at their faces and felt no joy. I felt a quiet victory, the victory of a man who had reclaimed his right to be seen. And when it was quiet, no one had fallen silent, no one had been completely destroyed. But a change had taken place. The small cracks in the houses of their lives had become places where decisions had to be made, the same decisions that had once been made about me. They had begun to weigh more. And the weight was uncomfortable. I stayed in the shadows because it was safe there. In the shadows, I can see reactions, see people changing positions, their pride giving way to fear and, finally, to be honest, remorse. The final step was a small ceremony of shadow. The night, the lamp, the slowly opening letters. I had no intention of humiliating anyone publicly. I wanted them to know that someone was watching, that their actions had repercussions. And when they finally gathered in the small space, each of their eyes were full of questions, nervous jokes, and lies. I was in the doorway, but not for the revenge sector, for one last conversation. I looked at their faces and felt no joy. I felt a quiet victory, the victory of a man who had reclaimed his right to be seen. And when it was quiet, no one had fallen silent, no one had been completely destroyed. But a change had taken place. The small cracks in the houses of their lives had become places where decisions had to be made, the same decisions that had once been made about me. They had begun to weigh more. And the weight was uncomfortable. I stayed in the shadows because it was safe there. In the shadows, I can see reactions, see people changing positions, their pride giving way to fear and, finally, to be honest, remorse. It was not a triumph over them. It was a triumph over indifference, which kills more slowly than a knife. Conclusion: lessons of old age, dignity, and the right to respect. When it was all over, the city did not roar with applause. No one stood in the street with posters in my honor. My children did not bring bouquets or words of gratitude. But something changed, more subtle than praise. Respect returned, although not warm, but cold, like the morning wind that disperses the fog. They no longer allowed themselves to openly despise. My daughter still does not answer calls as before, my son carefully rereads the contracts. Arson looks at me with a different interest, not laughing, but understanding. The society that savored my humiliation began to take into account the power of absence. People who passed by now sometimes hold their gaze. It's not something that will bring back my youth, it's not something that will heal my wounds, but it's a signal. The world can no longer pretend that I'm not there. I haven't become a saint. I've remained a flawed person, who knows how to calculate moves and has a long memory. I've learned not to forgive automatically. I've learned not to let myself be destroyed without an answer. And I've learned something else: revenge, even cold, doesn't bring back lost time. It only measures justice in response to indifference. In my nights, I often think about Vera. Would she approve? Maybe not. She was a different person, more about warmth, less about bills. But I know that she would understand my right to be noticed, the right to dignity until the end. And that's enough for me. I didn't seek power over those who betrayed me. I sought to regain my voice. And when I make a list in my diary, when I review the years and days, I no longer feel like a victim. I am an architect of small corrections, a person who reminded others, old age has weight, dignity is not a privilege, but a right. My game ended not with a sentence, but with a lesson. No shouts of victory, no celebrations, only a quiet but tangible change. And when I leave the house in the morning, my neighbor now sometimes says, "Good morning," not in a hurry, but as if asking if it's cold. It's not enough. It's real. And in the end, when I sit down at my desk again, take a pen and write a couple more lines in that notebook, I will know, even a shadow can sometimes teach the world to see the light. Memory is a shaky but stubborn thing. It never betrays me in the little things, in the smell of old tea, in the echo of Vera's laughter in the evening corridor, in the pressure in my chest when I hear footsteps on the stairs that are no longer mine. But now something else is wedged into this memory: notes, dates, names that I have drawn in a black notebook, like a map of missions. And as time passes, I see not only the traces of my actions on the successes of others, but also a change in myself. They ring less often. The phone sometimes remains silent for hours, as if waiting to see if I will follow the old paths again. Sometimes I think that a quieter victory weighs more than a loud one. Once my name created a line along which people moved, now it is drawn again, but in different ink. I don't need to be praised. I needed to hear that I still matter, that my life is not just a void that can be filled with modern gadgets and forgotten. The hardest thing has become with myself. Because when you return to those who betrayed you their own grievances, you feel both victory and emptiness. I see my son leafing through documents at night and finding no comfort. I see my daughter sitting with her face in her hands, picking up new arguments before talking to her colleagues. And sometimes, when Arson enters my room, his eyes are different now. They are a mixture of shame and incomprehension. I forbade myself from turning into a monster. I did not lose my morals. My actions were cold and justified, because the desire for revenge cannot be given over to emotions. It should become a punishment for indifference, not a glorification of cruelty. And sometimes I think, if Vera were around, she might have pointed out another path, the path of mitigation, the path of dialogue. But she left, and her voice now lives in me as a soft but impartial question: is this really you? The city has changed not impressively, but quietly. The people who used to laugh have disappeared. Neighbors sometimes stop for a minute when they see me with a package in my hands. They say, "Good afternoon," more simply, without irony. It seems to me that this is more a step towards normality than my victory. Because I want not a triumph, but the restoration of order, where an old person is not erased with a hand. However, to tell the truth, sometimes I feel tired. Because being the person who remembers and punishes is hard work. It takes energy and makes you return to the past, like a hot iron that constantly needs to be moved. I sometimes sit for hours and think about the days when I was building a house, when Vera laughed at my antics, when the children did not yet know what indifference was. And then I understand, the simple things that once made life complete are now the most valuable. I have learned to look away from the good things, at the morning dew, at the little dog running next to me, at the light that seeps through the blinds. It does not take away the bitterness, but it adds a different flavor to life. Sometimes I go to the park and listen to old people tell their stories, not about business and not about revenge, but about bread that smelled delicious and about hands that knew how to do good things. And then something softens in me. I understand that my role is not only to punish those who betrayed, but also to give others the opportunity to learn in a different way, through my silent testimony. There is another consequence that I rarely ask anyone about. I have become a stranger in the world, but closer in my thoughts. In solitude, I have found discipline. I know how much a word weighs, because now each of them can become dynamite or medicine. I know that respect does not come only from fear, it comes from understanding the limits of humanity. And if my lesson for someone is a reason to stop and rethink, then my action was not in vain. Time passes. Strength weakens. And here is what is important. I have learned to rely not on long-term panic, but on slow changes. They may be imperceptible, but stable. When children come for a short conversation and do not say everything at once, I remain silent. I give them space to feel the consequences of their decisions. It is difficult and harsh, but sometimes silence says more than words. In the end, I want one thing, for people to understand: old age does not mean worthlessness. It means you have a story, and that story has weight. It can heal or hurt, depending on how you use it. I chose to make it a mirror. And if through that mirror someone saw themselves and began to correct their path, then I have given the world more than revenge. And then, when evening falls on my roof, and the lamp casts a soft light on the pages of my diary, I take a pen and write not only names, but also phrases that I once said myself: respect, dignity, memory. And although these words will no longer change the past, they can change the next day, like a breath after a long, drawn-out scream. And that is enough for me.
Subscribe and like. And tell your friends about this video.